Hello, happy Thursday. This is Allison. And as I posted yesterday, I wanted to share with you guys today about my anxiety story and how I was able to overcome my anxiety. Now, I will say I'm not saying that this is the only way. I'm just sharing my story. So remember that. Um, and I wanted to do this because there's a lot of people I think that struggle with um, mental health, and that can be anything from, depression, anxiety, brain fog. I mean, just the health of our brain, right? And that memory. So there's lots of different things, right? And I'll share with you some things that have happened to me that have, I think, contributed. And why they can contribute, and then what I did and how my symptoms were. Because I know it's different for everyone and the symptoms that they might have for anxiety. So I'm going to start kind of back in time. um, so as a kid, I was very shy. And when I was in the third grade, we moved to cities. And I remember that probably that an entire year almost that I had these strange gut symptoms, like where I felt like I was going to be nauseous, or I was always afraid I was going to throw up in class. And I just remember going to the nurse a lot. I remember going to the doctor. They couldn't really find anything wrong with me. They did some testing. I don't know. I was pretty young. And looking back, I realized like that was probably stress and anxiety. I just internalized it. I tend to internalize my stress. I hold things in, which is not good. Don't recommend that. And, a lot of you know my story that when I was younger, I had a lot of antibiotics. Love sugar. I think, probably most kids do, right? Just remember being sick quite often with respiratory things. I know my mom even said that they put some special things in our air conditioning unit because they thought I had allergies, just because I would get these like wheezing, bronchitis attacks. And that kind of crept in, till being when I was a little bit older. And then, of course, you hit your teens. I had acne, had lots of antibiotics for that. And, it didn't get better that way. So then I took a drug called Accutane. 2 years later, I got cancer called a lymphoma that started under my left arm. The tumor got it was pretty big. It was 11 by 7 centimeters by the time we did a biopsy and started treatment and all that. So I had chemotherapy, radiation to this grouping of lymph nodes under here. Went back to college, went on with my life, and then went to PA school. All this stuff, is very stressful. I mean, but in a good way, right? I enjoyed it. And then I started working as a PA in 2004. had some of it start up then, but it wasn't that bad. And it came on as this sensation that when I swallow, it was like my body, it was like I tried to stop the natural process of swallowing. It was just the oddest feeling. So I remember one day, we were out after work one day with some friends from work, and I just felt really anxious and felt like I couldn't even eat. And I remember telling my friend in the bathroom, I think I have anxiety. And, I was just all upset. So I went home, got some sleep, and I was single, so I probably wasn't really taking care of myself that well. I wasn't eating that well. I would eat at work because the drug reps would bring in breakfast, lunch. I would go home and probably swing by and get something on the way home. Now, it wasn't McDonald's every day, but it just wasn't very healthy. And so I ended up having a scope done because I thought maybe I have a stricture in my esophagus from the radiation, right? And so I thought, gosh, if there's something functionally wrong with me, then I know I'm not crazy. And I don't say that lightly, because I get really mad if people say that's crazy. Because I think with anxiety, people don't really understand how you feel and what's going on in your head unless they maybe have had that too. So it's not a cool thing to say crazy or to label someone, or for someone to say, oh, her symptoms sound crazy, she's just crazy, that doesn't make sense. Knowing what I know now, a lot of people that have crazy symptoms do have something wrong going on. It's just the traditional community doesn't think they do. So don't use that term. I don't use that term lightly. I was just saying it to make kind of as what I was feeling. So had my scope done, perfectly fine. I kind of chilled out for a little bit because I thought, okay, then I know what it is. And, at that time I started to probably, take a little bit better care of myself, realize some of my triggers. Alcohol is a trigger. Lack of sleep is a trigger. I was in my first year of working. That was stressful. I was in family practice. That was stressful. I switched over to oncology a year later to work for the doctor that was my oncologist when I had cancer. So that was pretty cool. I was the first PA at this clinic. It was a fairly big clinic. So that was stressful. I had a stressful year just figuring out all that stuff. And patients didn't want to see me as a PA. They wanted to see their doctor, which I totally get. You're not forced to see a PA, but eventually people started liking me and they were okay with seeing me. On the occasion, I got a patient who yelled at me and was really rude to me, but whatever, I learned how to deal with that stuff. And so my anxiety got a little bit better. I was a little bit more involved in church. I just kind of, I think was, starting to run, doing a little bit better about taking care of myself. And then I had kids. I love my kids, but it's stressful. So this is what happened. In 2009, I got married. We bought a house right away. My husband started his master's program right away as soon as we got married. I got pregnant in 2010, had my first child in 2010. By that next spring, so 2011, my anxiety went through the roof. Going back to work, having a young kid, husband working and getting his master's, hormones a mess. It was so stressful. Like having kids is great, but it's so stressful. Breastfeeding was very stressful. I got a staph infection. I had a pretty potent antibiotic at that time, that one of the antibiotics that can actually cause C. difficile infection in your colon, which is really bad. I didn't get it. But it was a very potent antibiotic. I'm sure that probably contributed further to my poor gut health. So trying to survive, doing all these things, right? So it was around that time, probably May of 2011, that I thought, talking to my sister, because she's a psychologist, hairdresser psychologist, what should I do? I was hiding all these things for a really long time and tried a medicine. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get on Zoloft. I tried that, took it for about 6 months. People noticed that I felt more chill, but it didn't do for me what I wanted it to do. And that was get rid of my anxiety. It was still there. I just felt like a shell of myself. I didn't feel like myself. And then I still had anxiety. It wasn't quite as severe, but I still had it. And, I forgot that I had this. I think this happened before I started the medication. I had a panic attack while I was seeing a patient. I remember who she is still. I still had that same sensation of like, it's like my body would overtake when I would swallow. It's really hard for me to explain unless you have had the same symptom, but that's how my anxiety developed. It was all, for some reason, all about swallowing and choking or fear of choking. And it's like my head took over my natural functions of eating and chewing and swallowing. That's all I can say. Like I said, it sounds C word. It sounds crazy. So it was so bad. I had to leave the room. I remember going to my office, panic attacks are crazy. Like you really feel like part of the description of a panic attack is that you feel like you're dying. That is true. I could not recover. I had to have my husband pick me up from work. I had to leave. And so imagine having to just go on with your life after that happens. That is really hard to do, which is why I think I started the medication. And then we wanted to have another child. And so I thought, I got to get off this. And so I got off of it, like I said, 6 months later. And then I was like, I don't want to live with anxiety. I don't want to survive with anxiety. I also was having other health issues going on at the same time. that were getting worse and worse, despite my best efforts in exercising, eating right. I was already starting to remove toxins from my life, when Michael was born, because I didn't want to have all these crappy toxic products in my house for his sake. And so I started counseling, which was great. I went to a therapist. I read a giant book about anxiety, and I took a bazillion notes and learned that I'm not the only one that has anxiety, because you feel very isolated. You feel like I'm the only one that has this. And I'm not kidding. When the anxiety just starts to creep into it's like a weed. It creeps into all aspects of your life. I began to be afraid to fly. Never been afraid to fly in my life. Just because you're always worried about having a panic attack. I made excuses to not have dinner with friends. So if you were around me back then and I was acting a little bit off, that's why. Like I said, I didn't tell people about it. I hid it. I acted like everything's fine. Like you see people on social media, everything's hunky-dory fine. It's not fine. So I hid all this stuff, right? So the counseling helped. I learned some behavior modifications. I learned some, it's called cognitive behavior therapy. I learned progressive muscle relaxation. I learned some breathing techniques. I started doing a little bit of meditation. I read a book by Dan Harris called 10% Happier, because he had a panic attack on screen. He's a TV person on ABC. Hi guys, Georgia, Jessica. Hi, thanks for commenting. So I just read books, and I read things that made me feel better. And I did something called guided imagery, which is kind of cool. Because what would happen is this: I would have a plan. So if I had dinner with a friend coming up, even if it was 2 weeks away, I would start mulling it over. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen when I go to dinner? This is what my brain was doing. Or if I had a flight coming up, oh my God, am I going to have a panic attack on this flight? You just start having worst case scenario in your head. And so guided imagery, you walk yourself through a situation over and over again, where it's calm, where it's fine, where you think about what's good while you're flying somewhere, you think about all the good stuff, and you picture yourself on the plane, getting on the plane, all these things, and you do it over and over again. So by the time you get to that situation, you're like, I've been here, I'm fine, it's fine. So I learned some of that stuff, which was pretty cool. What else did I learn? Those were the big ones. Just trying to learn how to relax, because what happens, I know how bad anxiety is for our health. And so then what happens is I'm anxious about my anxiety, because I'm anxious about the stress it's creating in my system, because that fight or flight that you have when you should have it, like if something scary is happening and you need that epinephrine release, that's how you feel kind of like with a panic attack. Or sometimes I'll just be sitting in my car driving, and all of a sudden this sensation like that you're about to freak out, that it's like this weird warming, you just start to like almost have this panic for no reason, nothing life-threatening was happening. And so then I was having anxiety about the anxiety, because I thought all this stress is stressing out my adrenals, because I know stress is related to disease. And then I'm like, what if I cause myself another cancer because I have all this stress and I'm stressed about the stress? Right? Oh my goodness. So it was rough. And so like I said, that was 2012 is when I started counseling. Got quite a bit better. Still had the anxiety, but it was like I didn't feel like I was going to freak out every day. But every single day I did think about my anxiety, and I did have maybe some mild things, but I knew that if I felt this way, I could breathe, I could do different techniques that I learned to reduce it, but it was still there. So then I had my daughter in 2013, and my therapist did say, you're going to probably have a spike. Now, when I had my kids, they give you the epidural, or I had an epidural. The medication, I guess it's a pain medication they give you, makes me feel like I'm going to have an anxiety attack. So I hate that. I hated that part. I even told her not to give me the systemic part the second time around, but I still felt for about an hour after the epidural like I'm on the verge of having a panic attack. And so then, yes, so extra stress. And what was going on back then is my son was 2.5. He was getting sick a lot. He had pneumonia when he was 2. While I was pregnant, he had pneumonia, and they said the flu, but I don't think he had the flu. I was pregnant. My husband hurt his back, and they said, you can't take care of your son. And I went, that's telling a mom she can't take care of her son who's sick because she's pregnant is like, that's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. So there was all this stress going on. Like, I'm not kidding. Every month he would get this wheezing. He would, like, one day I picked him up from daycare and he was blue, and I'm still working as a PA. Not happy, struggling through the day. Again, like I said, more health issues were getting worse, like fatigue and all these other things were going on, besides the anxiety. And then, and my daughter decided she didn't want to take a bottle. So I'm thinking, this is my last kid, my last maternity leave. I want to enjoy it. No, it was stressful as heck because the last 6 weeks of it, I was trying to get her to take a bottle. And let me tell you, she didn't take a bottle till she was 7 months old. So I had to go back to work. The day I went back to work, my son was sick and my daughter wouldn't take a bottle. Awful. If I had to go back and do it all over, I wouldn't have gone back to work. But I felt like I didn't have an option back then. But now I do. Now I'm home. So I really didn't think I was going to cry. Okay, anyway, moving on. So went back to work. I had to leave work every day at lunch to feed my daughter and then worry about her the rest of the day that she was starving to death. Which she's fine. She's 5 now. She's totally fine. And my son's like miraculously a lot healthier. So anyway, so that was 2013. Still struggling. 2014, I decided to do something different. I started learning about the gut and gut health and the connection between the gut and the brain. And I had like a light bulb moment and I went, oh my gosh, this is my issue. This is my problem. And no one is like, I didn't learn this in PA school. No one has brought this up to me. I started taking some supplements that completely changed everything for me. And because I was anxious, I just kind of took one thing at a time because I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to make me go off the deep end. And like I said, I was also doing things like I quit caffeine, cut way back on drinking because that would, like I said, it made me feel better. I was exercising. I've always exercised, try to get enough sleep. I did all those other things, right? I was doing all those other things that you should do in addition to the counseling, which I had stopped. I think I stopped counseling somewhere in 2014, maybe towards the end of 2014. I did it for almost 2 years. It was pricey, but I really think that helped me a lot. And I still learn things today to manage my stress. Okay, so started one thing at a time. And what I realized is that my diet wasn't cutting it. I realized that I think I was low in magnesium. A lot of our food and soil are magnesium deficient. Magnesium is known as like the ultimate relaxer in our body. It chills us out. It helps our blood pressure. It does so many different things. And like I said, I'm not trying to make medical claims here. This is my story. So don't go off the deep end on me. Started some magnesium, started some stuff for my gut health, and like lo and behold, and even while I was starting that stuff, I was still kind of skeptical because I was traditionally trained, and I thought, we're taught to look at the body in pieces, not as the body as a whole, which is why I consider myself a holistic health coach now. And so I was like shocked, but happily shocked because it was helping me. It was balancing my gut health. And like knowing what I know now, I'm like, duh, I had a horrible gut because I had antibiotics all the time. I ate foods that were, making things worse. I had chemotherapy, for goodness sake. If you survive that, you're left with I don't know, a bunch of stuff. Later on, when I worked with a functional medicine doctor, I learned that I had autoimmune thyroid, which I was getting a lot better under control by the time I figured that out. I learned that I had one copy of an MTHFR gene mutation, which makes it harder for me to remove toxins. So by taking supplements that I needed for my gut and for the methylation, which is removing toxins, and then I took dairy out of my diet. I had a food panel that showed me that my dairy was pretty much almost off the chart, causing me to have autoimmune reactions to the food, and then contributing to something called leaky gut and candida overgrowth. All these things are very real. This is not something I made up. It took me a long time to actually believe it myself, even though I was going through it and getting better. So I was still skeptical when I was starting all these things. But what I learned is that that was my underlying cause that I had not addressed through counseling, through removing caffeine and all these other things, right? You can do all those things, which I encourage because they play a role. But if you're not getting to the root cause of what your issue is, you're going to be like treading water. You might get a little bit better like I did, but until I did these things, I didn't get better. And it wasn't overnight. It was a very slow process of me doing different things, changing my diet, adding in certain supplements. And even like a year or two ago, I was a lot better. But even in the last year or so, it's gotten even better. So it takes us time to heal. I mean, you think of my history, what was that? How many years is that? I started in my 30s. So what, 30 something years of bad thing, one thing after another affecting my gut and causing problems, and then having this other thing I didn't know about. So I encourage you to not settle for okay. I was never someone that liked to take medicine. So it was a struggle for me to take the Zoloft. But I'm always someone who's like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And so when I work with people and they're having different issues, I'm like, let's get to the root cause of this. And it could be different for other people, right? It's not one size fits all. Like diet's not one size fits all. I don't do a certain diet. I just eat foods that are good for my gut. Whole grains, tons of vegetables, certain fruits, good fats. I'm trying to do fermented foods. I'm trying. And I take the supplements that are good for that are keeping my gut healthy, because we're constantly hit with things that are causing problems for it. So I don't know I don't call it a diet. I just call it, I'm eating for my gut. So that's kind of what I did. And, it's awesome to be able to say that I don't have anxiety anymore. But if something were to happen and it were to kind of flare up again for whatever reason, I know what to do. So it's either something I've done on accident, or a stressful life event might kick some things up too, right? So I exercise, I sweat, I eat right for myself. I take supplements, and my other goal is to start doing a meditative practice. Now that I'm home and can work from home, I'm taking care of myself better. So, and I did so pretty well even when I was working, but for the last 4 years, I've been working and doing other side things. So it's been a challenge, right? And then the kids are young. But my point is, don't settle for okay. I don't want to tell you what to do. Sorry, I'm telling you what to do. Look for the root cause. If you're not getting the answers you want, look elsewhere. It wasn't like the first person I saw was like, oh, it's this, this, and this, and this. I had to do a lot of it on my own. But I was led that direction, which was, when I look back at it, it's like things were put in my front of me, and I just had to open my eyes for it, and pay attention. And I'm so glad that I did. So, gosh, I've been talking forever. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Who says that? And there's some radio person that said that. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. And maybe this helps somebody, maybe not. Everyone's story is going to be different. But looking at something holistically, looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, looking at your body as a whole, and keep searching until you find things that work for you. Don't settle for okay. And don't say things like, oh, I'm just getting older. This is normal. It's supposed to happen. I don't believe that either. Because I've seen patients who are very old age-wise and are very healthy. And I've seen people younger than me who are very unhealthy. And it's a choice. We have a choice. We can choose to do something about it, or we can choose not to. So choose yourself. You're definitely worth it. All right, signing off. Have a good Thursday.